Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on one of the most high-stakes environments in all of entertainment. I'm talking about professional wrestling, and specifically the corporate behemoth that is WWE.
Right. And what we're looking at today is this intense duality of life at the very top. You have the spectacle everyone sees on TV, and then you have this crushing personal and systemic vulnerability behind the scenes.
Exactly. Our mission here is to give you a complete picture of the climate of fear that existed, the way the job of a superstar is changing, and just the extreme personal cost of it all, when those lines between character and reality get so blurred.
Yeah, and we've got some incredibly revealing material to work with, mostly coming from a remarkably candid interview with two of the biggest names in the business, Becky Lynch and her husband, Seth Rollins.
And this isn't just gossip.
No, not at all. We're synthesizing their actual testimony on everything from, really serious workplace intimidation allegations from years ago to how they managed their own personal crises, burnout, even relationship boundaries, all while living completely under the microscope.
It's a rare, unfiltered look.
It really is. It's a look at what it takes to survive in that ecosystem.
And what's so valuable here is that you get this timeline of the internal pressures from like an older era of institutional control right up to the modern chaos of social media algorithms. We have to start with the most serious and frankly chilling accusation that Becky Lynch brought forward. It describes a systemic problem female talent faced when she first got to the main roster.
She detailed a deeply disturbing situation involving an unnamed male WWE talent, a former colleague of hers. Lynch described a system of sexual intimidation and really power abuse that she felt created this impossible, toxic, a lose-lose environment for women.
And it wasn't just a one-off incident.
No, she made it clear it was pervasive. It was well known enough to be seen as an active danger within the locker room.
And the mechanism behind this alleged abuse, what she called the dual blacklist, that's what makes it so important to understand from an institutional perspective. Lynch explained that this person had enough backstage power to essentially ruin a woman's career under two different scenarios. Okay, so scenario one. If a woman gave in, if she slept with him.
She'd be professionally blacklisted afterward anyway.
Right, but here's the part that just reveals the whole goal was control, not intimacy. If a woman refused his advances.
She would also be blacklisted. The outcome was identical, professional sabotage no matter what she did. It wasn't a choice, it was a complete trap.
Lynch used a really powerful analogy for this. She called it walking a constant balance act.
A narrow tightrope. That's what she said women had to walk, especially around 2015 when she was new to the main roster.
That tightrope analogy, it's just heartbreaking because it perfectly captures that psychological weight.
Oh, absolutely. The emotional toll she described is so tangible. She talked about how women in the locker room were constantly warning each other.
Like an underground network.
Exactly, a network for self-protection. She even recalled the moment the man got her phone number. And her immediate thought was, how should one handle such a thing?
Wow.
It just speaks volumes about the constant draining mental energy required just to protect your career.
You realize the power dynamic was so skewed that your career wasn't threatened by a mistake in the ring, but by how you handle a social or an intimate situation backstage.
Precisely. And Lynch connected this personal risk directly to the larger institutional structure. She said the fear was that if any backstage relationship went sour or created any kind of stress,
the woman would be the one to pay the price.
Always. She was very clear. It will always be the woman who gets fired, not the man.
Yeah.
Which suggests the power structure itself was enabling the alleged abuse by always protecting the person with more perceived power.
And given how serious this claim is, we should note the current situation. Lynch has been very careful not to name the person, which has, of course, led to a huge amount of fan speculation online.
A torrent of it, yeah. And her choice not to name names, even now, with all her success, it really speaks to that lingering fear of reprisal, legal or professional.
It does.
And institutionally, we have to note there's been no official statement from WWE about any of this. Not about the claims, the timeline, or the status of the man who's been accused. But the fact that a star of Lynch's magnitude is saying this publicly, it's a profound indictment of the culture at that time.
That context of institutional danger is such a critical anchor for this whole deep dive. But let's shift gears a little because Seth Rollins offered a view on how the professional landscape is changing today, and it's a fascinating contrast. The pressure cooker is still on, but the ingredients, the talent, are different now.
Yeah, Rollins reflected on the sheer physical grind that he and Lynch went through early on. He talked about a schedule that demanded something like 200 matches per year.
200. I mean, that's more than half the days in a year.
And that's just wrestling. That doesn't even count travel, promotional work, the little time off they had.
The pace of that old schedule, as Rollins put it, was basically the ultimate sorting mechanism. He said the intensity just sorted out anyone who was only there for a job because the burnout was so severe, you had to have this deep passion, almost an obsession, just to survive it.
And just think about the physical toll.
Mm-hmm.
You're constantly wrestling hurt. You're navigating airport security every single day. You're never in the same bed 2 nights in a row. It's grueling.
So what's fascinating is how he contrasts that with the modern recruit.
Right. Rollins observed that WWE is now scouting and signing these incredibly gifted athletes from outside traditional wrestling schools.
Mm-hmm.
Former football players, Olympians, gymnasts.
They're amazing athletes, but they didn't necessarily grow up dreaming of being a wrestler.
Exactly. And that leads to this fundamental shift in mindset. Rollins said that for some of these newer athletes, wrestling is seen first and foremost as a job and a secure source of income.
Not a lifelong passion.
It's a high-paying, very unique athletic contract, not a spiritual calling.
And if you think about the product, that raises some big questions, right? About longevity, about storytelling. If the talent sees it as just a paycheck, what happens to the creativity, the dedication to character, that emotional investment you need to make wrestling feel real?
Well, yeah. When you're on the road that much, that deep commitment is what keeps you from having a complete mental breakdown. Without that passion, the job becomes functionally unbearable.
Rollins did add an important caveat, though.
He did. He said he believes that even if some lack that passion at first, no one can last long-term in a business this punishing physically and mentally if they don't eventually learn to love it. The industry will just spit you out otherwise.
And that level of investment, it naturally spills over into their personal lives. Which brings us to Rollins being incredibly transparent about hitting just an absolute breaking point in 2018. He called it his existential romantic crisis.
This is where you really see the profound challenge of just trying to maintain a sense of self while living this nomadic, high-profile life. Rollins talked about how, during this crisis, he genuinely convinced himself that polygamy, a non-fixed relationship model, was the right path for him.
That's a pretty intense conclusion to come to.
It is, but his reasoning wasn't just about casual relationships. It came from a place of deep fear. A fear that his constant travel and the demands of his career would make it impossible for him to be a good partner in a traditional, committed relationship.
So his career identity was basically eating his personal identity.
It was consuming his capacity for commitment.
Mm-hmm.
He was projecting the failure of a normal relationship because of the extreme pressure of the WWE schedule.
And Becky Lynch, who was a close friend at the time, becomes this crucial turning point for him. When Rollins approached her about, being more than friends, he laid out this very complicated view on commitment. And her reaction
was to set clear, firm boundaries. She just refused to compromise her own emotional needs for a relationship model she didn't believe in.
She put herself first.
Absolutely. She prioritized her own self-worth over starting something with someone she obviously cared about a lot. She basically told one of the biggest stars in the company, "My happiness and my definition of commitment are more important than the stature in being with you."
It's a total inversion of that power dynamic we were talking about earlier. Here, she was the one in control of her own emotional life.
And it was a massive inflection point for him. Rollins said he realized within 2 days that this whole intellectual thing about polygamy was just a panic response to the stress.
And he didn't want to lose her.
He desperately didn't want to lose her. He told her she was the one person who positively influenced his life. And it was her strength, her ability to hold that boundary, that forced him to confront his own crisis and figure out what he really wanted.
So then this deep personal relationship has to survive not just the internal career stress, but also the total chaos of the digital age.
Yeah. Rollins gave this really intense description of how social media just amplified all his professional pressures around 2019. It turned a really tough job into an absolute nightmare.
And you have to understand, wrestlers are trained to process feedback. They live off the immediate reaction of a live crowd, the cheers, the boos. That feedback is instant, and then it's over.
But social media. Rollins explained that it takes that one moment and stretches it into this relentless, days-long analysis. Every move, every word, every facial expression gets picked apart and amplified online for days.
And this is where it gets really interesting, the role the algorithms play in all this.
Yes, Rollins specifically talked about how the platform algorithms are designed to amplify negativity, because that's what drives engagement. So this created a completely distorted, totally unrealistic view of his character and his actual standing in the company. It's a terrible feedback loop of anxiety.
And this huge external pressure led to what he openly called a personal breakdown. He found himself becoming dependent on the comments of strangers.
Letting anonymous, algorithm-driven feedback define his self-worth. And that emotional dependency started to seriously damage his mental health and his relationship with Lynch.
It's such a classic example of how modern identity is just eroding under digital scrutiny.
Especially in wrestling, right? There, the job of the heel, the villain, is literally to get people to hate you. Algorithms can't tell the difference between performance hatred and genuine professional failure.
So what was his solution?
It was extreme, but he said it was necessary for survival. He recognized how toxic it was, and he withdrew completely from Twitter. He just stopped reading comments on any other platform.
He also made a powerful point about the fan community itself. He felt that social media had given fans this perception that they could control the creative direction of the show just by being loud and negative online.
And he recognized that as just fundamentally unhealthy. Unhealthy for the wrestlers trying to create their art, and unhealthy for the community that's just trying to enjoy the show.
It's a really profound connection point for this entire deep dive, isn't it?
It really is. We started with the systemic risk back in, say, 2015, where a woman's career could be destroyed by one man with institutional power. And we end with a modern risk of social media, where a top performer's identity and mental health can be sabotaged by a digital mob, amplified by algorithms. In both eras, the biggest stars are fighting against forces that feel totally beyond their control.
That's a perfect summary of the key nuggets we wanted to share today. For you, the listener, we hope you now have a much deeper understanding of those institutional pressures, the changing idea of professional commitment in wrestling, and the extreme, often crippling, personal cost of navigating fame in that world.
And here's a final provocative thought for you to consider as we wrap up. When an industry is built on such intense passion and physical sacrifice, how much responsibility does the corporate environment have to regulate the personal ethics of people in power? And what structural changes, beyond just firing a person here or there, are needed to get rid of that tightrope that performers, especially women, have to walk in any high-profile competitive industry?
A question that resonates far beyond the wrestling ring. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the world of WWE. If you enjoyed the conversation and you found these insights valuable, please remember to like and abonnieren und kommentieren.